Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, good, it's recording. Nice to have so many people here with us today. Welcome to Behind the Lens, which is a presentation by the Museum of Contemporary Photography at Columbia College Chicago. My name is Karen Irvine, and I'm the Chief Curator and Deputy Director of the museum. And today it's my pleasure to have Carlos Javier Ortiz here with us to have a visit to his studio. Carlos is a documentary photographer and cinematographer and film director whose work looks at daily life in Black communities and addresses issues of racism, poverty, gun violence, but also embraces aspects of joy and celebration in everyday life. His work was part of a really great show that we had in 2019 called Chicago Stories, which was a two-person show with David Shalial, organized by my colleague, Kristen Taylor. And Kristen was supposed to facilitate the visit today, but unfortunately she couldn't make it, so I'm here in her stead. But in addition to showing at our museum, Carlos has a really impressive exhibition record. His work has been shown at the Worcester Art Museum in Massachusetts, the International Museum of Photography and Film in Rochester, New York, the Library of Congress and the Detroit Institute of Arts, amongst others. And his photographs illustrated Ta-Nehisi Coates' article, The Case for Reparations in 2014, and that was the best-selling issue of the magazine. So they got a lot of widespread exposure there. And his film has won many awards, including the Best Documentary Short at Crested Butte Film Festival, and the Best Cinematography and the Short category of the American Film Institute Awards. And Carlos is also a Guggenheim Fellow in Film and Video recently in 2016. So it's really my pleasure to introduce Carlos to you all. Carlos is in Chicago, not far from me, and he's going to show us some prints and also has a PowerPoint for us of his work, and then we'll have a little conversation about what it means to work in a studio and kind of bringing work out into the world. And then we'll also open up for questions. If you have questions, please put them into the Q&A section and I'll monitor those and let Carlos know when we have questions pop up. We can just do this kind of informally. So Carlos, thanks for being here and nice to see you. And
Thank you.
To you for a minute.
Can you hear me? Are we good on the here? Can you hear me? Are we good on that end?
Yes, I hear yes from a few people.
Okay, cool. So thank you, Karen. I've known you for a long time and seen your wonderful exhibitions with the strong crew of women who curate shows at MoCP and educate a lot of young people and of every age group. And so it's great being here. And so with that said, I'm gonna just go into, can everyone see the, Karen, I don't see you now, but can everyone see the slides up? Does that look good? So if you can see, are we good on the slides? Can you see the full screen, the slides? Okay. So what I'm doing here today is I'm showing some work. I'm showing proof sheets, I'm showing slides. I'm gonna talk about my artistic practice. So I'll start here with some images shot on an iPhone when I started shooting the Case for Reparations. I had the opportunity to read the article, Ta-Nehisi's article. I was one of the 4th or 5th person to read it, and when it was sent to me by Daryl Cooks, the designer, him and I worked at Ebony, and he designed pages at Ebony and designed the magazine for a long time. So he knew my work, I knew his work, and he wanted me to shoot black and white. As you can see here, I experimented in color, and I shot square format for a little while. I also shot Polaroids, and so this is like kind of some of these, actually a lot of these buildings are not here anymore. They're gone. And I just moved through the neighborhood, photographing with the phone, with my 35mm camera. and also with a Polaroid land camera. So you see the churches, the buildings that Ta-Nehisi was talking about on the west side. And I was very familiar with these buildings, very familiar with the landscape because I've been working here on the west side. I grew up on the northwest side of Chicago, but I've been working on the west side for a long time. And then the south, moving through the south side, you can see here, down here, some images, some Polaroid images that I'm like drawing. And so this is the Fuji Polaroids. They give you a negative. I forgot the Polaroid type. It's black and white. I think it's 3200. And so this is what the negative looks like. These are my proof sheets. I work in Lightroom nowadays. And you can see the buildings, like I'm talking about the neighborhoods. So a lot of it is mixing formats between Polaroid, 35 millimeter. All these up here are Polaroids, but then also, you know, I'm also hitting parts of it with the iPhone, and again the Polaroid. This is a portrait of Mr. Clyde I made with Polaroids, and Daryl, the designer, he let me just go about. He didn't really give me any instructions. He's like, I want you to shoot the way you shoot, and also Ta-Nehisi was like, you know, I just want to see what you do. And we had a little conversation about the people in the neighborhood in the article. And so again, I just kept going back and forth to this building in particular that's not there anymore. This used to be a theater. And you know, what happens to these beautiful structures where people lived, thrived, made art inside the structures. And then, you know, the neighborhoods are abandoned because of obviously a white flight, but everything that Ta-Nehisi was talking in the article, redlining, and this happened throughout the north and the north side. I'm sorry, throughout the west side and the south side. So this is just recently. This is 2014. These are beautiful structures, beautiful homes.
Carlos?
And then, you know, shooting murals in color, shooting murals in black and white.
Carlos, can you hear me?
And family portraits. Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. We are getting some comment about, could you open up the images a little bit bigger? Is it possible to show a few? Because people are having trouble, I think, seeing them on there.
Yeah. These are just proof sheets. I'm going through the proof sheets first right now. And then we're going, so I'm just, you know, showing you proof sheets right now. And then I'm going to go into the larger images.
Super.
So it's a teaser.
Okay, got it.
But it's also part of the practice, right? Like, how do you look at things in this format, and you know, whatever. I look at things in I take a frame. I think about a frame of in film and cinematography. A moving image is 24 frames per second is what we see. And so, you know, taking one frame out of that 24 is photography, right?
It makes sense as a filmmaker that you work like this in Lightroom.
Yeah. And it started, and then obviously the practice started for me as a photographer because I didn't know how to shoot with film cameras, you know? And you know, the conversation that people have nowadays are like, have you ever shot film on a film camera? Well, you know, I shot 8 millimeter when I was a kid, and I never really shot 35 millimeter because it's so expensive. But you shoot a roll of 35 millimeter, you know, thousands and thousands of rolls and that's the same, you know, it's the same format, except it gets cut at 30 or 36 frames, and it gets packaged into a little film bulk, or it gets put on a, you know, on a reel that's 300 feet, and you go through it in about 5 minutes, you know. And it's kind of the same thing with Polaroid, you know. So Polaroid is very valuable to me because it's a print that you can give to somebody right away. So again, these are all images, the Polaroids. I photographed the television a lot. That's part of my practice. Mandela died around that time. And I was also working on 2 projects simultaneously in Ferguson. Oops, just trying to go back a little bit here. All right, so I'm just gonna skip over some of those proof sheets, but I wanna show you a picture of, this is my wife's father, and she's a Black woman who's mixed. She's Black and Jewish. Her mother's story is the story of the South. Her father's story is the story of this Jewish family who migrated from Belarus. And they went to the West Side. They lived on the West Side. This is a home on the West Side of Chicago. And this guy would come around with ponies and take a portrait of kids on ponies. So I found this picture in the house, and I turned the picture around. And then that's up here you can see I believe, here's the address on Harrison, the last name, that's probably the order number. Here's the print, how much the print's gonna cost. I think the parents wanted an 8x10, 6 3x5s. And you just wrote this on the back of the print and you gave the print to the family, you know? And again, that, you know, that's part of like family portraits, history. And then, you know, the neighborhood changed. You know, these neighborhoods went from like white families to Black families. And then when Black families moved in, like my mother-in-law, she lived not far from here where these projects were. She lived on in Bronxville. This is in Hyde Park, a mural in Hyde Park, but she lived in Bronxville. This is on the south side of Chicago, a church that's being demolished, a Catholic church. And these neighborhoods got redlined. And then going back to, you know, from the case of reparations to another project called 1,000 Midnights. After I worked on the case for reparations, all these things that Ta-Nehisi talked about really started, like, I started visiting all these memories my mother-in-law talked about, being in the South and coming from the South. So I really started exploring it. We went to the South. There's a family portrait at a barbecue in Walnut, Mississippi. And, you know, from a family portrait in Walnut, Mississippi to families coming to visit Mike Brown's grave in Ferguson. So this is the block where Mike Brown was killed. And I took a Polaroid with me and kept shooting this project, connecting the history of the South to the North. It's the gravesite where Emmett Till was buried in Chicago, outside of Chicago. And going back to the other side of the family, my mother-in-law's side in Walnut, Mississippi. And then found portraits of project housing in Chicago. This is Cabrini Green, and now, you know, all these projects, all this housing where people lived is all gone. There's a Target there. There's just grass. There's no evidence of what was there. It's going back to the case for reparations, just signs and things I saw that reminded me of Chicago, Obama, the election. And this is now gone. You really won't see like election signs, you know? So I like to photograph the contemporary moments in history that become, you know, again, you know, when you look at a picture of Obama, it makes me think of pictures of Kennedy on a wall, or Dr. King. And then, you know, photographs of Clyde Ross. This is the man that Ta-Nehisi Coates featured in the case for reparations in the beginning of the article. And the Atlantic put the article back out, so it's out there. So these are all the portraits. These are all the portraits and Polaroids that we were seeing in the little. Sorry for the little tiny proof sheets, but I just wanted to show you the process. This is the gas station that was burnt in Ferguson in 2014. And this mother, she's like, baby, take my picture here with my son. She said to me, baby, just come here, we're gonna put our hands up. And she knelt with her son. And so this is a portrait of her and her son in front of the gas station. And then I saw her at the Million Man March, and she came up to me and gave me a hug, and she goes, now take another picture of my family. So I took another picture of her and the family at the Million Man March. And so I'm gonna move on to the process of my book, We All We Got. It was published by Red Hook Editions in 2014. A lot of things happened, you know, in my career, my life, and around that time. And the book was published, and I had a lot of attention drawn to it, and it was interesting because there was a lot of attention drawn to it, but then it kind of went away, and people didn't. I don't think people were exploring the issue of gun violence as much as and the effects of gun violence on Black and Brown communities as much as they are now, and that attention. I mean, I've paid attention to this issue for basically my whole life growing up in Chicago, but also a decade of photographing it and filming it. And now people are really like aware of it. After police shootings, after high profile shootings, and people really taking to the streets. And so I also made a film called We All We Got. It went to Tribeca Film Festival and other film festivals around the country. And simultaneously, I was making a film and working on my photography project. And this is kind of the way I work. So, you know, I'm showing you here articles. So like from the beginning to like the beginning of shooting, going back to the studio, looking at work, contacting families, speaking with, you know, like staying in touch with people for long periods of time, and then having exhibitions and exhibiting the work and putting it out into the world. So those two things go hand in hand for me, and they take a long time. Here's the work at Weinberg Newton Gallery. And you'll see here the ephemera that I'm going to show you that I got from families and people in our neighborhoods, in Black and Brown neighborhoods. And I just really kept these, and I'm going to talk about why I kept the ephemera and why I have it. And then I made another film and another photography project, again, simultaneously, called 1,000 Midnights, which I just showed you some images from it. it's a show I had at the Bronx Documentary Center. You should all check out the Bronx Documentary Center. Beautiful place. So I projected in the exhibition, I projected the names of young people who were killed by gun violence. And I did the same thing in the book. So I'll show you right now, I'll show you the concept of those two things. Karen, are you still there? You still with me? Are there any questions that we should
I'm still here. I just turned myself off so I'm not distracting from you. We don't have any questions at the moment, but everybody please feel free to type them in. So
I just continue real quick through this and go back. This is the exhibition at the Bronx Documentary Center. I like to exhibit. Obviously, you want to exhibit in large spaces. The best museums in the world, you want to get those exhibits. Like, you want your work in collections, which is really important. But it's also really important. This is in the hood in the Bronx, and I'm surrounded by the people that I grew up with, the community that I photographed, friends that I know, and the crowds are like large and excited and engaged, so just like the show at MoCP that we had, it was just like, we had all 3 floors, and so it was a beautiful show, and it was very engaging, so I appreciate having an exhibition like that. Although it's not the the quintessential it's not the Met, but it's the neighborhood. It's where the work begins, it's where your studio might be, as we're talking about studio practice, right? Carrie James Marshall's studio is near where he lives, in his neighborhood in Bronxville. Working with kids, Pulitzer Center, and young people on the West Side that participated in making mockumentaries, are called. And so now I'll just go back out. And are we back to full screen?
We are. Yep.
Okay. So how are we doing on time? We got like 20 minutes. So let's take a second.
I have a question if you're...
Yeah, I'll take a sip of my coffee and show you prints, but yeah, let's go with some.
Yeah, let's do a question and then we can move into the prints. In the work you make, how is it received in different communities, from the hood to some of the institutions you show at? How is it received by Black, brown, and white folks?
Mm-hmm.
So you addressed some of that, but it'd be interesting for you to elaborate, man.
So the community, like Black and brown communities, I always get this question. It's a question that I think especially like the past three weeks now, after these large protests have taken place all over the country and also Europe. I think that these questions that funders ask of, like, are you taking the work back to the neighborhood? Those questions might change, right? I think those questions might change to, are we taking this work into downtown Chicago? Are we taking this work into downtown, into Brooklyn, into Manhattan, into the Met? Are we changing the way things are exhibited and viewed for the public outside of the neighborhoods? Because the neighborhood, in the Bronx, it feels, like the Bronx Documentary Center, it was like a being home, having this conversation at home around the corner, right? Of where you live or where you practice your work. And I think that's great, but also I think it's important. Like, I've had these these films go to, you know, the China Theater in Hollywood, you know, and so you're like, your film is playing in the China Theater in Hollywood, and you're bringing this work into this other space, you know, into the space where you're just like, you never think it would be there, or you never think it's seen there, and it really changes the conversation up. I had to work at the Milwaukee Film Festival, and a woman came up to me and she's like, we really need this work here in this community because, you know, there's a all-white audience that never seen a film like this, you know, and I'm just like, wow. So it's important for programmers, curators. It's important to bring these spaces outside of the community into, you know, white spaces, or into places where you know, you're maybe supposed to see Picasso's, you know, alongside that. So I think that conversation is starting to change, and it needs to change, I believe, a lot faster.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting to hear you talk about that, because as a, you know, downtown institution, when we have shows that are about issues that relate to certain communities, we're always kind of feeling like we should bring them to the communities. And so I think the question, you're right, is not that there's a level of education or awareness needed. It's more that, you know, I'm planning a show about gun violence right now, actually, and thinking about ways that, you know, we can get to actions and solutions, right? And so if the artist, for example, is willing to go into the community and, you know, provide some kind of program, like engaging perhaps with youth, that can be inspiring and constructive, right? And kind of, I mean, the question is always like, how do you really move the needle, particularly on legislation and so forth? And how can artists and institutions be the most effective in these areas? Because it's true, it's one thing, it's a good thing to, you know, put up shows about all of these issues, and, you know, invite a certain audience into the museum and hope that something's taken away. But even that's not enough, right? So how do we go beyond that, but in meaningful ways, I think is the question that, you know, many institutions are grappling with right now.
Yeah, no, and I think, you know, my work is about Black and brown life, right? Outside of the issues that come together, right? Like the gun violence and the things that, the poverty and the things that affect us, right? But also just life, right? It's also about my own family, my own people, you know, the people that are there every day with me, you know. So
Yeah.
It's actually bringing the show. I mean, you've all done that very effectively. I think you've kept it open throughout decades, you know, bringing amazing shows to the center of downtown Chicago, you know.
Thank you. I mean, I think the question is, how do you go further? You know, how do you, and with all of our exhibitions, like from an institutional standpoint, obviously, you know, where we like take on a lot of different issues, whether it's pollution or violence or, and all kinds of injustice, right? But we're never the experts really in that topic. We do a show for 3 or 4 months. And so we are well researched, and we do try to kind of really understand, but we really rely on the artists and the partnerships with different organizations to kind of make sure that, you know, what we're doing is kind of as relevant as it can be and as sensitive as it can be too.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's also too, it's very hard to take on that responsibility. But, you know, being able to show the evidence of that thing that took place and having it for future reference you know, you can have it in different ways, of empathy and compassion and love, but being able to prove that, right? Being able to show that, like, look, this is through art. This is how we had this conversation in 2014, and then we had the same and the Dawood's show showed that really beautiful. And the whole exhibition just built up on the bottom of the show which was what took place in Birmingham in 60, help me out,
63.
63. And then the bombing of the church, and then Dawood coming back and making that relationship. And so I think that's our responsibility, right? Is to bring that back into the conversation, because most people say, "Oh, I didn't know," and you're like, "What?" And Dawood Bey and I talk about that all the time. We talk about that, and I learned so much from him. Like he tells me things that I'm like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that there was, when the 4 little girls were killed, there was 2 boys shot, 1 was killed. I had no idea, so, through art, these conversations do take place. Sometimes they take place between artists a lot of the times, and then they take place between the public, and obviously we need the public to have this conversation more and more. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, for those of people who might be watching who aren't familiar with Dawood's project, it was looking back at Birmingham, Alabama in 1963, and he did a long-term residency there where he found little girls who were the ages of the girls who died in the bombing, and then paired them with pictures of adults who were the age of what the girls would have been 50 years later, and kind of makes diptychs. And what's so beautiful about them is just that, these people, it just reminds us all of our humanity, right? People, they're just elegant portraits, and the people are looking directly at us, kind of implicating us. And it's about really the loss of potentiality, the loss of, a life that was not lived. But throughout that exhibition, there's also somehow, I think, an element of hope and like the complexity that you're talking about. And certainly that holds true for your work, Carlos. And it was interesting with that exhibition, it was mostly like completely well received, but we did have one visitor who kind of, I remember, was a little angry, like, I know this history, and I don't want to see any more shows about Black people being repressed and having to fight for, equal justice and all of this, which is super also interesting to think about, right? I mean, of course, it's obvious that these struggles are still as relevant, unfortunately, as ever. And that we were so surprised that even young people coming to the museum, 1963 is ancient history for them. It's not in their lifetime. It's like in their grandparents' lifetime.
Well,
and they're actually, a lot of our visitors weren't aware of that history and how similar really it is to today.
Yeah, no, and I, you can correlate that to Ferguson, like somebody was making the point on television, a journalist was making the point that the kids who saw Ferguson on television were maybe in high school or grammar, and I'm like, and now they're protesting George Floyd's death, and I'm like, I can't even like that. Like 2014 was like a year ago for me, like time is just, I have a baby, and I think time started when he was born for me. And I've been in this project, We All We Got is, this project took obviously almost a lifetime, because I saw these things happening in Chicago growing up, but it took 15 years to complete to finish it all. So like a decade to get the images and the book together, and then the film, and getting it all out in the public. And obviously I was doing other work between these times. And yeah, so my studios usually now, it was between Chicago and San Francisco. I live here in Chicago, and I also live in San Francisco part of the year. So my studio now is in San Francisco, and I'm in Chicago for the summer for a little bit longer. So I go back and forth to work here, to live and work in SF. And yeah, so do you want me to show how much time do we have?
We have about 25 minutes. So
Okay.
yeah, we have plenty of time, and I think everybody would love that. To see
Yeah.
some.
So I'll show. So this is like, here's like what we got looks like. Here's the book, like the cover of the book, and then the book itself. It's the back of the, and these are special edition books. So there's only 100 some made out of this. Published by Red Hook Editions, like I said. And yeah, and so this is the end product. And the beginning product started basically kind of started a layout with Tom Tien, who was the designer of the book and a good friend of mine. And we were talking about making this book during the Occupy protests. Remember that movement, the Occupy protest? It seems like a long time ago, right? And so we were out there photographing, and I was just checking it out. I met him, and he lived in Hyde Park, so we were neighbors. And we just started talking. He's like, "Yeah, I can design your book." And man, was he amazing. And so like this is like the final, after, I don't know, 30 different iterations of the book. This is a book dummy, basically. Like I took this to FedEx. We cut the pages down on the big cut press, and we just laid out the book. And I glued, you can tell like the glue's coming off the pages. And so I had a long conversation with, like, you know, again, you could go back to your friends. I would show this to my friend John Lowenstein. I edited this with Jason Eskenazi, who lives in New York. He started Red Hook Editions. It was like his conception. And he had me, you know, we sat down and we went through this book. Jason and like a bunch of other people, but we went through this book on a wall, and it was a nightmare to put together because it was just so many pictures and it was very difficult. And he gave it to me, and I was like, "What now?" And he goes, "Go home and put it together." I was like, but it was very helpful, right? Because I've never done that. I've never opened myself up, and I'll never do it again. But I never opened myself up to this vulnerable situation of having all this personal work on a wall and having people move it around and edit out and comment on it. Some people didn't get it, and that's gonna happen. Some people are not gonna understand, you know? But I think what Jason wanted me to do is just go back home and go through it and put my understanding into it, you know? And, you know, the decision was to edit the book non-sequentially, not and put a feeling of what happened throughout the years and how the repetition of gun violence and these issues that happen in the community take place, but also how the community comes together, right? And that was, you know, how we play and have fun and remember. And so, yeah, so I just, you know, took it there. And when it was done, when I had it in this format, I brought it, I remember the first people I showed it to like this was Dawu Bey had a Christmas party down the street. We don't live far from each other. And I'm in the, you know, I'm like showing it to Dawu Bey, I'm showing it to David Chalio, a bunch of people, and Sherilyn Bruce and Carrie James Marshall walk in. And I've never met them, right? So we were just talking about New York, we were talking about Chicago, and I'm showing this to Carrie, and Carrie and I had like this long, strong conversation about the book and the work. And yeah, so I showed it to a lot of people, and it just didn't change. the layout didn't change from this place. So it came from here, book dummy. Then, you know, then you ordered actually the real book. And so like, that was the cover. And then here's the book dummy, like the layout of it, like what is it actually gonna feel like. We made it the size of an iPad, so you can put it in your bag. I like this size. And that's like, if I make another book, it's gonna be that size. They're all just gonna be one size. Because it makes sense to me. And yeah, so the book actually started here a long time ago. We made a magazine of ephemera and community engagement. I forgot where I made these magazines, but I got I got a grant from a community engagement grant, Open Society, and we wrote I got sociologists to write a foreword, Jens Ludwig, and letters from these young people I was working with. And Tom actually laid this out too. So it's good practice to like take your work and lay it out and put it out for several projects, you know? And then we took some of the kids' work. We also laid out my images with these young, and I let these young kids from a little village that I've been working with that were part of the community engagement grant.
Cool.
Just go at it, you know, like, and so they were adding their voices to the images, and it really taught me that, like, you know, photographers have this, images are valuable, but they're also not just yours. You have to, you know, obviously be very careful with them, but you also have to open them up to people. So they were just laying out, some wrote these analog tweets on poster stickers.
Nice.
Kind of before Twitter was getting, even, you know, getting famous, and drew on books. And this is very helpful for the kids in this program to, you know, talk about gun violence themselves, because they witness so much of it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Wow. Mm-hmm.
This is, again, look, the conversation. And the conversation just takes place from the photographs to like small pieces of paper. And again, this wasn't me doing it. This was the community. So one of these young men, he was writing about his friend dying, and I was photographing something at the Obama Foundation. The Obama Foundation has this program for youth called My Brother's Keeper. And I met one of the brothers that was working in this program. His little brother, where's his name? His name is somewhere in here, I can't find it right now. But his little brother recently was murdered by gun violence, you know? So like, he wrote in here about his friend, and then I end up finding out that he was killed. And you know, these things are just devastating. You know, just the cycle is crazy. So yeah, so I mean, I just have all this work. It also was given to me by families. I can show you. Here are the actual notebooks.
Nice.
Yeah, so here are a bunch of notebooks that were put together. Here are my notes throughout the throughout the year. I grabbed, found ephemera during the election of Barack Obama, which is kind of interesting component of my work of We All We Got that I kept. I found this flag. There was like thousands and thousands of flags, but I found this one flag that I just kept, and obviously has different ways of being displayed in the exhibition. And again, the obituaries, writings that people, I didn't know what to do. Like I would go to, let's say a protest about gun violence, and I just didn't know what to do. I just didn't know what to do with these pieces of paper. And obviously people would give them to me, or I'd find them on the ground. And I didn't want to throw them away because, a lot of people throw them away. And it was just part of the conversation. So how are we going to look at this, 30 years from now?
Yep.
This young man, Dimitri, his family and a bunch of young activists actually create, like, the reason why there's a Trauma One hospital at University of Chicago right now is because after his death, he was listening to his music. I think he was in front of his house, and he was taken from the South Side to Northwestern. And his mother and sister and a bunch of people from the neighborhood were like, listen, this got to stop. We need a Trauma One hospital at University of Chicago. And they fought and built one, So the conversations that are taking place about defunding the police, there's different ways of having that conversation, but the action that was taken to just get a hospital was really, the university responded to it, and did it. Anyway, so this ephemera.
And Carlos, you said you exhibit the ephemera alongside the photographs?
Sorry?
Sometimes you exhibit the ephemera
Yeah.
alongside the photographs?
I would love to more. And these are mothers I've known that gave me shirts. Yeah, I haven't had a large exhibition to be able to do this. To be able to put all the work together. Here's a mix. As I'm working also on 1,000 Midnights. It's another project about my mother-in-law leaving the South, the connection of the South and the North, Black folk leaving the South, coming up North, and what does the North look like today, 100 years after the Great Migration? And so one day I was out working, and I used to work for Ebony magazine for a while. That's where I met Daryl, who worked at the Atlantic and laid out the case for reparations. And so I found this Ebony, and it says the Black middle class. And I found it next to this beautiful building in Englewood that was just being destroyed. Like, it was like this brick terracotta building, and the folks in the neighborhood were just like coming up to me, like devastated that it was a bank, and then it became a church, and then the church got abandoned, and then it was being torn down. It was being wrecked. And this building was at least 100 years old, but it had terracotta. I had like all the bones. This thing smells like mold. but Theaster Gates has this collection of Ebony, right? Magazines, and I used to work for Ebony magazine, and then you see like the the signs of the middle class. And then decades later, you see the signs of the middle class, that neighborhoods that were middle class that are now being, you know, that are very poor now and are being destroyed.
Oh, I know that advertisement.
You do?
Ayana Moore incorporated part of that image into a painting that she made in response to Ralph Arnold's work that was in an exhibition we did in 2018 about identity. So interesting.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no, go ahead, please.
No, that's it.
No, and you know, even like you're looking at the product and you're like, oh, you know, gin, like, and then the story, you know, the story's in between the article, right? And I could show you, you know, I have my Ebony magazines all wrapped up that my work was published in, some of the work I showed you, you know, so it's this thing of like, you know, in the history of photography that like you work for a publication and that work gets published, but it also goes into, so it goes into the publication, but also, you know, you continue to work on it and it goes into collections, you know, it goes into like the work you guys have in collections was published in magazines. So it has two, to me, it has two places of relevance, you know, relevance.
Relevant,
Yeah. And again, advertisement and painting and, you know, cultural references. You know,
and when you take the image of the woman's head away from the text, it does something entirely different. It's really interesting. And that's, yeah.
So, and here's my only jet cover. So, and then the magazines that the work is all published in, I got it all wrapped up because, so yeah, this is like the stuff you know.
The stuff. Well, and it's cultural, right? All of these things are cultural history, you know, like all of these mementos of gun violence too are so interesting because there's so many of them and they're so fraught. I'm working with Andres Gonzalez now, who does work about school shootings. And a lot of communities that go through that, they get thousands and thousands and thousands of like objects and letters and all kinds of ephemera, and they actually don't know what to do with it. And there's like lots of times it's just destroyed because it's almost too much to keep and manage. But then there are people who say like, this is part, like we need these, like you said earlier, for 30 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now as a record of what was happening in our society.
Absolutely.
And so that material is, and it's so powerful, right? And so potent and interesting. Thank you for sharing all those things with us. It's really nice. Would you like to take a few questions? I think we have some good ones. Let's see. So Levi Shand, who used to work at MoCP, says, hey, Carlos, love your still and video work. Thanks for talking today to us about your photo process and your thought process. I've been thinking a lot about the roles of photographers of color, contrasted against the roles of white photographers in terms of documenting the protests going on. I'm especially thinking of Tulsa coming up soon. By your estimation, is the job of a documentary photographer the same irrespective of race, or is there nuance and context to consider before someone goes to photograph a political event?
I mean, I think it's a hard, to me, it's always a hard question to answer. So I think the most important thing is to listen and to listen to what the wave of people are telling you, what the community is telling you, to be connected, and not to have these rules that you're supposed to, I don't know. It's a hard answer. It's a hard question to answer because I think you just have to, to me, you have to just keep, you have to keep people, the community you're photographing or documenting, or writing about, or making a film about, which could be documentary or narrative, you have to keep the true meaning of what that community is, you know. It has to come out in your work. And I think you have to go there first, and then step back, you know, and let go of the expectation you have of what you think you're gonna tell to society.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. That's hard. You always have to work on that, you know.
That's good. Thank you.
Hopefully I answered that right. or answered it.
Well, here's kind of a related question with a practical dimension. It's great to see you working with young people. It's important for the youth on Black and Indigenous people of color community to engage with artists that are representative of their own community. Is this something you do fairly regularly? Do you have any suggestions for other BIPOC artists to get involved in mentoring youth?
Just do it, you know, just go and do it. Try to find money to do it. Go and make that connection first. Sometimes you don't have to, but I think if you want to do it, you have to just go. You have to just go, close your eyes and do it. Because and listen, you know, listen to them, bring something to the table, and ask your, you know, ask the politicians, ask the people around you who, you know, ask them what they want, what kind of change they want. But it's really about going out and doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Have you been actively photographing the recent BLM protests, and have you had any changes in your approach? One of our viewers wants to know.
That's a great question. I just been taking care of my baby right now. It's very hard right now for me to go and photograph it. I'm just kind of taking a step back. I've been in the middle of it for so long that right now I just want to hug and kiss my baby and really think about the film works. Like, I'm working on a narrative film that's been written, so I want to get that out, and really kind of like I think the time right now is a time that I fought for, and many people fought for, to get communities that have been sleepwalking, people that have been sleepwalking, that are people that's not my problem, to get these folks out in the streets. And now it's my turn to like take a deep breath and go and keep doing the other things that, you know, address the other issues and talk about fun, beautiful cultural stuff that you know, that deserves a place, you know. So I think right now for me it's important to make sure my films get the narrative films I want to make get funding. You know, press on like the Netflix, the app, you know, Apple TV, the studios, Amazon, all these people that can fund big projects. You know, I don't know what's going to happen to Hollywood, and but independent films that are under $1 million can be made. It's hard collaborating right now because we are going through an epidemic, and we need people to collaborate. We're not, you know, just painters that can work in a studio, but yeah. So I'm working on that now, just kind of taking a step back.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the new film?
Yeah, so the new film is written around We All We Got and the characters that I've met that I've never got to record or film or video. Well, I saw my photograph, but it's just a narrative film in that vein of you know, redemption, reconciliation. When we think about gun violence, you know, what people don't realize that, like, a lot of people in the Black and Brown community, there's always a yeah, we want people to go to jail, but then there's always this thing of like, we forgive you, right? And so like the film is about forgiveness, youth, these young kids growing up, 2 girls, 2 boys growing up in their 20s, and goes back to the election of Barack Obama. So it hits on the election. It takes place in the election of Barack Obama, and then you get little sprinkles of the Apprentice show coming on television here and there. And then,
I wish we could all go back to the election of Barack Obama.
yeah, or so here's it's kind of like here's
Oh, cool.
the storyboarding it with the script, and then writing notes and working with my friend Elizabeth, the writer, and collaborating, going back and forth. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. We're at 1 o'clock, but if you have 5 more minutes, we have a few more questions.
Yeah, let's go through them.
If everybody, we still have 67 people with us, so.
Thank you all for being here, by the way. I really appreciate it. I'm sharing my baby's sharing the room with us. So family's sharing the room.
When you're exactly, it's like we're all doing different balancing acts these days. Earlier when you were showing us the book, I was thinking, I heard Leslie Martin say on a talk recently that she considers books now to be kind of time-based media, right? Because there's quite so, and as a filmmaker, we have a question that talks about that. How would you compare the process of making a book to a film? And how important is a photo book to your process, to the completion of these photographs? So
I said again, how important?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand. How important is a photo book to your process, to the completion of these photographs? So maybe that's implying, are you thinking already about a book as you're making photographs? But I'm interested too in how your identity as a filmmaker really influences perhaps how you approach a book.
I think the process of, I think my brain was going through a lot when I was making this book, because I'm an editor too, so editing films is very difficult. Editing a book is very difficult. It's a very difficult process, and it's not a process you can rush, right? And like having I had a quick conversation with Spike Lee one time, and he said he was telling me how he edited. And I was like, oh, that's how you do it. And then he goes, you can do many things many different ways, and and I think why he's a good director is because he knows how to coach a basketball team, for example. The simplicity of getting human beings to move, so I think for me the process is backwards. The process is I'm taking in all this information, and then I need to be alone, sit with it, and make it happen without like moving a whole bunch of people, And so for me, the process is the reverse. It's the taking in all this information and then putting it in a place. And I think that would answer the question of the book. How to putting a book together and then editing a film, they're very different but similar in the process of thinking of 24 frames, thinking of how movement works, because we're so repetitive. Human beings are like, the world is repetitive. We wake up, it's either sunny or not, and we eat and do the same thing over and over. And yeah, so I just try to bring that concept into book editing and making a film. There's films where like when you watch Star Wars, I watched one of the Star Wars films, and nobody ate the whole film. Nobody sat down and ate or drank. The first Star Wars people were like at the bar drinking, but in this one, I forgot which one it was, nobody ate. And I'm like, this is a 2-hour film. Like, you got to eat something, So like putting that human connection into the process of editing, you got to put those sprinkles in there. And you learn that from friends, right? I don't know, when you're editing or when you're just learning how to edit or curating, right? You learn that from people. You learn from your colleagues, your friends. They tell you, they give you signs of these things, you know?
Absolutely. How long did it take you to finish the book, and how many dummies did you make? Our viewers want to know. How?
I think I made like 8 dummies, and I don't know where they are. People have them.
They're going to be collector's items someday.
Yeah, I would like lend one out, and it never came back. So I think somebody gave me one back. I have no idea. I only have one. This dummy I showed you. I don't know where it is, but this is the only one I have. But I made a bunch of them. This is like the conception of like where I want it to be, where I wanted the spine to be. And I learned how to glue really well. And yeah, there's people like my friend Matthew Avellone. He would sell these books, and like they were just gorgeous books. And another, you know, he just made these books where I'm like, that's a book dummy?
Right.
Really? Like, dude, come on, that's a book dummy. Itch
Cool.
things and
Yeah. All right, well, maybe we'll take one more. Sorry to everybody if we didn't get to every single question, but let's end with, how has your work and work of contemporaries like Zoom Lee, Rudy Roy, Wayne Lawrence helped photo essays connect to action? What actions would you want to have enacted? Like, so I think that's a nice place to end, about impact. And do you have a dream, you know, or is there
I think
a
that
vision of something that photo essays could do that might, again, kind of make some difference?
yeah, I mean, I don't look at it in photo essay. I look at a bigger picture than photo essays. I look at like history. So I mean, I think the photo essay is important to tell a story of a week or a day or maybe a year. But I'm thinking about like a decade, you know, which is probably an issue. But I'm thinking about like a long-term vision of society. And then what was the other part of the question? Like, so that,
What actions would you want to have enacted, if you can?
so I would answer that as like, I think the action is really the conversation that we had today, you know? You know what I mean? The action is not this direct thing like I want Donald Trump to resign. You know, that's not like, I know that's not really going to happen. So I think the action is us coming together, having a conversation, you all going out, having your own conversation, your own, you know, bringing your own concept of what Black life is, what brown life is, what, you know, whatever the issues you're taking on are, and then having your own action. But my action is having this conversation between you and I, who I've always looked up to and admire, and saw you all, you know, the whole crew at MoCP come together and showed, you know, because I went to Columbia, so I would see the exhibitions, and I'm talking about, you know, almost 20 years ago. And it just kept going and going and going. And now I'm part of that conversation, you know? And so that's my action, right? Is being in the middle of, you know, this large conversation of what my artistic practice is, and also the way I see that, you know, the way I see my community, the way I see like Black and brown bodies, you know, in the context of photography or film. and and then you're inspired by, historical painters, contemporary painters, like people around you, like Carrie James for me, and Cheryl Lynn Bruce, the great actors, the great actress Cheryl, seeing Daughters of the Dust, the film they made together. Yeah. So I'm, it's just like this buildup of society around you. The action for me is being able to have these conversations in large forms, in spaces where this work has not been, it hasn't been in, it's been in magazines throughout the years, but it needs to be in museums. It needs to be in places where we come together and see the work. And maybe that's different now. Now it's like the museums are closed right now, but we're having the work, the conversation here, or we will have it outside on, posters and billboards or film festivals. And so to me, that's the action.
Yeah.
My practice just doesn't fall into the photo essay. It takes a larger, conversation.
Absolutely. That's all those ripple effects are why we all do what we do. Thank you for the work that you do and for putting it out into the world. And thank you for being here today. And thanks to everybody who's watching. This was really great. So
I wish we could just like copy all these questions.
we can send you a transcript of that includes questions and participants and everything else. So you have a sense of what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So to speak.
All right. Send in love. Just keep, communicating with people and engaging, and it's our time to really change society. And we need to go out and vote in November. Don't sit it out. Don't sit it out. Let's change it. Let's really change the future for our children, our families. The haters. Let's bring the haters in the circle and change it for them too. So.
Absolutely. That's a nice place to end. Thank you, Carlos. Thanks so much.
Bye, y'all. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.